Well, welcome back to The Pew, everybody. I am your host, John Edwards, and this week I am in studio flying solo. I've been out of town, obviously, with the Italy trip that we talked about on the previous episode, and then I had an opportunity to kind of get away for a few days and take the kids down to my dad's farm in Mississippi. I hadn't seen him in a few months, so I went down there and spent the last few days cutting acres of grass and fixing things and picking vegetables in the garden and just doing all kind of stuff. And so just got back today, had an afternoon full of things I needed to do for the ministry. Got our men's group that's meeting here in about an hour. And then I'm leaving to head to Fargo this weekend. So wasn't a lot of time to try to get together with Victor and get an episode this week. So I thought I'd jump in here because I had a conversation with a guide a couple times this week, and just some interesting things he was bringing to attention and to light in my own life, and just struggles I've had lately, and the way God does sometimes when I'm intentional about seeking him and what he thinks, and kind of have my antennas up, as an old Memphis Grizzlies player used to say. I could pick up on some messages that sometimes turn into what these podcasts become for you to listen, but also, for me and Victor also to learn from, and to understand what the Lord is saying to us through these things. So that's what I'm going to do this week. I'm just going to share some things with you here, just me in here with you. I hope you don't mind. And before I do that, I just want to say thank you to all you that have become supporters of our ministry. Those of you who have become partners in the Pew, we've had several people roll in at $15 or $25 a month or $100 or whatever it's been. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, because every time I see that, I am overwhelmed with just your generosity. And just amazed at how many people we have that listen, that not only want to hear this podcast to grow themselves, but they want to give back to others, because that's exactly what it does. When you give to the ministry, it allows us to reach more people and to do more things for parishes and to launch groups and all of those things. So for those of you who become partners in the Pew, thank you. For those of you who would like to join us as partners in the Pew, you can do so by going to justaguyonthepew.com. There's a donut. There's not a donut. Many of us would probably like a donut if you went to a page and donuts just started popping out of the computer. I know I would personally like that. But what I mean, it's been a long day, is donate. You can donate. There's a button on the left side of the screen that rolls along with any screen you go to that says donate. You can click there and you can give and support our ministry, become a monthly partner in the Pew, and become a partner of ours in this ministry and in this work. Or you can go to the top right corner of justaguyonthepew.com, and there's a button there that says support. You can also go directly to www.donorbox.org/pew, P-E-W. So www.donorbox.org/pew. And you can become a partner in the Pew there. It will help. All the money goes to supporting what we need in the ministry to grow, to help other people meet the Lord, and to put men into authentic relationships with Jesus first and foremost, and one another, so that they can become the men they're called to be. So thank you to all those folks. But yeah, I just want to jump in here and kind of get started and talk a little bit about what was going on. And folks, I'm going to be probably, pretty honest in here. I hope I always am, but just about where I've been lately. We've had a very, very just blessed year. We've had tons of opportunities to go to men's conferences and to work with dioceses and to work with parishes. And then here in my own diocese, I've been working alongside a lot of men that I'm walking with, trying to help them out of their struggles and trying to help them see past their shame and their mistakes. And, and I just got back from the pilgrimage. We've just been blowing and going. And, folks, sometimes in the midst of all those things, you start to get tired. And when you start to get physically tired, your spiritual life sort of suffers. And, sometimes in the midst of doing ministry work, I can find myself lacking on my own spiritual life, the things that I need to do to keep me on the narrow road, if you will, my prayer life, and going to Mass and some of those things very quickly. As I think, well, I'm doing ministry stuff, I can get very off kilter in my own spiritual life. And I've noticed that's happened some lately. And, when I get like that, sometimes I get really down. I start looking and saying, well, are we really making a difference? Or is what we're doing, affecting people? Are we really helping the people that it seems that we are? And then it starts to go a little bit deeper, right? And the devil starts to get in there, which I talk so often to people about. This is why I know to talk about it, because I often am attacked by him in this way. But I'll start to feel like, well, do you have what it takes to do this? Do you have, the gifts that you need to do this? Or have you gone as far as you can go? Or are you at the end of the road as this may be for your ministry and for what you could do for people? And then I just start beating myself up and I start feeling so just down, right? And just feel helpless and feel like I'm not good enough and that the Lord can't use me and all those things that all of us feel so often. That's why I'm able to talk about them so vividly is because oftentimes I struggle with those things. And it's funny, in the midst of those things, I'm trying to pray my way out, not trying to, I am praying my way out and continue to offer myself back to the Lord, because it's in those times of struggle where it's really the time to see what we're made of, right? It's easy to follow the Lord when the birds are chirping and the sun is shining and everything's just going our way, and there's dollar bills just everywhere you go on the ground or whatever it may be. Good fortunes abound all over you, and it's easy to keep the Lord in the forefront of our life and the blessings that we see and just go, man, I really love God, and God, you're so good, and all those things. But it's in the time where sometimes he withdraws back, like he never leaves us, but maybe he pulls back some of that grace to where we actually find ourselves struggling a little bit because we've walked away. And it's not so much maybe him pulling back or removing grace. It's the fact that he's just allowed us to kind of go off on these rabbit holes or to start, stepping off that narrow road and into that wide road that leads to destruction. And oddly enough, as I was finding myself in this place, and as I went to my dad's, I had my kids with me. Angela had to stay in Memphis because of work. We left on Sunday and stayed through today, which was Wednesday. I had to get back for a call I had with the JP2 Healing Center about our upcoming men's conference stuff we're doing alongside them. The kids had dental appointments and things like that. And then we had our men's group tonight, so I had to come home today. But amidst all that, I had time, like I said, on the lawnmower. It's one of my favorite things to do, just mindless work that you're out there just rolling and looking at God's beauty and trying to see him in it and just clearing your head. The phone's not ringing. People aren't emailing. You're there just kind of by yourself and God on this mower. And I put in earbuds. A lot of times I just hit random or put it on something and random songs play. And so that's what was happening. And as I was riding on the lawnmower, this one song came on, and it's from an artist I like to listen to. He's very popular now, an Americana artist. His name's Zach Bryan, and he's just a wonderful songwriter. I mean, some of his songs have some words and things in there that, if you got kids and you're going to go try it out, just be careful of. But for the most part, I really just, I love his songwriting. There's some beauty in it. There's some pain. There's some joy. There's some loss. He lost his mother, and he writes a song or two about her and how much he loved her. And I've lost my mother, so I connect in that way with him. But there's this song, and it's really a poem. And I guess if I think about it, or if we think about it together, a lot of songs, that's what they are. They're just poems. And so he's kind of strumming a guitar and he says, this is a poem I wrote, and the song's called This Road I Know. And he's just talking about how he some nights wakes up in a fever dream or a vision of sorts, is what he says in the beginning. And he starts talking about how he's going down this dark road and he's in a car and he can hear and feel the gravel, but he doesn't know where he's going and all these things. And as I started to listen to that song, I've listened to it hundreds of times. I was always drawn to it because of just the profoundness I find in it about life and how it can be how we all feel sometimes, that we're like, we know where we're going, but we don't know how we're getting there. And we can feel lost. And he'll say that, and he'll say, I'm on this road and it's dark and it's cold and I'm by myself and I don't know where I am, but I know exactly where I am. And it's things like that spoke to me in the song. So I was listening to it, and we'll go back to the lyrics here in a second. But as I listened to that, I listened to it several times, and it was bringing me peace. And I didn't know why at the time. I just felt, sort of just jammed up, and we had all these things upcoming in the ministry. And I always feel like I'm a day late and a dollar short, and I'm always falling short to my family, or falling short to the ministry, or falling short to the guys that I walk with in the ministry. Just feel like I'm never enough sometimes, or I'm not giving enough, or I haven't figured out a way to be enough for people. And folks, this isn't a pity party for John Edwards. I'm just sharing with you how I feel, because I think sometimes some of you must feel the same way too. And it's in those things that we have to realize that it's not about us. It's about what the Lord can do through us. And it's exactly when we try to to get in that, when we get in, not try, but we find ourselves in that lens of getting into that place where we think it's all about what we can or can't do, is when we get into those struggles and when we feel desolate and alone and not enough, and those things is because we simply are trying to do it ourselves. And the thing is, when we are, when I finished cutting the grass and turned the lawnmower off and went in the house, I took a shower, and I thought, I haven't read the daily readings, and these were on Tuesday of, this will be last week when this episode comes out. But the readings that day were from Matthew 7 and the end of the Sermon on the Mount. And Jesus, he starts to talk about the narrow road and the narrow gate. And many of you that have followed this ministry and maybe even subscribed to it at one time a few years ago, we were writing out a monthly journal that went to men each month called the narrow road. And it was basically a way to try to help men live a virtue in their life each and every month for 30 days through their relationship with God, with their wife, with their kids, and with people around them. And it had things you could do every day to sort of check off in the front of the book, your opportunities for grace, to do the things like pray and spend time with your family and go to mass and go to confession and go to adoration, those things. And it was about the narrow road. And the readings that day were about the narrow road. Now there's different versions and different gospels, and they use different terms, but I want to read the latter half of the reading from yesterday, which will be a week ago Tuesday for you guys when you hear this, and you gals. But the verse was Matthew 7, chapter 7, verses 13 through 14. And it says, "Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the road broad that leads to destruction, and those who enter through it are many. How narrow the gate and constricted the road that leads to life, and those who find it are few." And I just thought about, man, here's this song I've been listening to over and over again on this mower as I'm trying to sort through where I am in my life, with my family, with everything going on in the world, with this ministry, and feeling desolate and down as I thought, or as I told you that I was thinking about myself and feeling about myself, and just finding myself sort of just in this box that I couldn't punch my way out of, and I was having trouble praying my way out of. I was reaching out to people. I've also, just to share something personal with you guys, when I was in Italy, I found out that, the priest, Father James Martell, that's been like a father to me in my life, he's, contracted a form of cancer in his kidney, and I don't know a whole lot about it right now. I've been to visit him. I've been seeing him, but he's being very kind of guarded about it. He doesn't want anybody getting discouraged. He'll actually find out some news tomorrow, but just to see him in the state that he's in, and the physical, he's lost weight, things like this, it's been very hard on me. So that's another thing that I've been kind of battling with, because he means a lot to me. And I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for him caring about me and walking with me and pulling me under his wing. So that's been hard here lately, as I'm being honest and open with you, as I said I would be. And so just navigating all of that and riding that mower through acres and of grass and 102-degree day, and just being glad to be out there doing these mundane things and listen to this song. And then to go into the house and to find the reading led me to this reading of the narrow road, something that's been close to my heart and something that I preach about all the time on the road on our, restoring your identity missions and restoring, restored parish missions. I talk often about how being a Christian is hard. It's very hard, and if we don't find it to be hard, then we're probably not living rightly. We're probably not living in the right manner, and we're probably not living as the Christian that we proclaim to be. And that's not to be judgmental. It's just I know that's where I found myself. When I find it on cruise control and easy, that's when I find myself not living the life that I'm called to live correctly and appropriately and as passionately as I should be as a Christian and as a Catholic man. Most of the time when I find it easy, it's when I find myself on that wide road that he talks about here. He says, wide, for the gate is wide and the road broad that leads to destruction. Those who enter through it are many. And the funny thing I was thinking about as I read that reading and I reflected on the song is, the wide road makes us relax. It makes us comfortable. It makes us put it on cruise control because the road is wide and it's straight. And we don't have to worry about edges or sharp curves on it. We're surrounded by thousands of others going the same speed and direction. It makes you feel like you're on the right path and there's nothing to really worry about. It's just a straight shot and it's easy. And that's the way the devil lays it out for us, right? That leads us closer and closer to him and further away from Christ. And because we're surrounded by so many others as Jesus leads to, like many will find it. Many are on that path to destruction. We find ourselves on there and comfortable in it. But the thing is, what we realize or what we don't realize isn't the danger is the sharp curves or the edges or the lack of them being there. It's the road itself. It's the road we've chosen that's the true danger. And sometimes we can find ourselves on that path, but sometimes, folks, we can be walking the narrow road, the one that Jesus says, how narrow the gate and constricted, the road that leads to life, and those who find it are few. And I think sometimes we can be on that narrow road and we could think that it's just going to be easy, right? Because no, I'm living, I'm praying, I'm doing the things I'm called to do, and I'm going to Mass, I'm going to adoration, I'm putting my wife and kids first, and I'm trying to live as this new man, or maybe I'm trying again to live as this new man because you've fallen. And we think that narrow road is going to be without bumps, without curves and sharp edges and cliffs and places to run off the road if we're not careful. But honest to God, that road has more of the turns and more of the sharp edges and more of the dangers because it's so hard to live as a Christian, because we can beat up on ourselves when we fall and when we fail and when we're not enough, right? Or when we feel like we're not enough. And when we take control of the wheel away from Jesus and we put our hands back on it is when it becomes harder to navigate. And I got to thinking about all of that. And I remember when I was little, I'm going to date myself, and some of the older folks listening to this may laugh and get a chuckle out of this as they remember. But I can remember being 16 or 17 and having, getting my own car and a little Bronco 2 I used to have. And of course, it was blue because I'm obsessed with blue, if you haven't figured out that by now. But I remember going on a couple of trips down to my grandparents, where I was this weekend, where my dad now lives, or down to visit my sister at college, or off to visit an aunt or something like that, or go on a trip with buddies. And back then there weren't iPhones and GPS, and there weren't even Tomcats and all those, whatever those other things were called that you'd put Garmin's, you'd put on your dash of your car to just plug in the address and listen to the lady tell you, in her soft, pleasant voice where to go. There wasn't that. Like, it was you got a map. And you map things out, you highlighted it. Or my mother used to go to AAA when we were going to head down to, Disney World in Florida and drive that 16-hour drive from Memphis. And she would, they would have like blue arrows all on the different roads and the turns. And Dad would drive and Mom was the navigator, and she would, tell him where to go. And sometimes we'd get off the wrong path. We'd wind up on some road in some town where we took a wrong turn, and maybe it was an hour and a half of driving before we realized it, and had to backtrack and go back the wrong way. And of course there was arguments and fights, and you've all had parents, and if you were old enough to remember, you know what that was like. But there were often a lot of times when I was by myself, and I was trying to drive and trying to look down at a map, and the places I were going they weren't all interstate, like between Memphis and Nashville, where you just get on the interstate, hang a right, and drive straight for 3 hours. It was getting off off the interstate on these side roads and through these towns and having to take turns here and there. And man, there were so many times where I remember, especially the first time I went on a trip like that, where even though I had a map and even though I knew where I was going, I knew the destination, man, I got lost and I got scared and I got nervous, and I didn't have a cell phone to call my mom or dad to ask for help. I was scared to go in a place and ask people because I'd never been in that place before. And I'd get down and I'd want to turn around and just try to find my way back and try to go back to where I started, or go back to the, my life before I went on this journey. And a lot of times I think that's where we all can find ourselves. And it's what I found in this song, in this poem that he's reading as he's strumming this guitar, and this beautiful work of art that he's put out there. And, one of the parts that struck me, he said, I don't know where the road leads, but I know exactly where it ends. And I think that's something we can forget about in our struggles amidst the storms of our life, and amidst the challenges that we face and the snares the devil throws in front of us. If we can get so downtrodden and so lost and so turned around and so backwards sometimes that we feel like, I don't know where this road leads, and we can think it's a bad thing. And it is, if we don't keep in mind where we're trying to go. And where we're all trying to get to is, along the way, we're trying to be the man or the woman that we're called to be, the husband, brother, father, and son, or the wife and mother and spouse and daughter we're called to be. But we can get off, we can turn the wrong turn, we can make a mistake, we can lose our way sometimes on that narrow road. And it can feel like we're miles away and we're back on that interstate that leads straight to destruction, as the Lord said. But oftentimes we're not that far from it. And the thing is, we have to keep the end in mind. That's what he says in the song. I don't know where the road leads, but I know exactly where it ends. And isn't that so true? We know that when we come to know the Lord and as we grow in our faith and we're taught, as we're catechized or brought up in our faith, if you're one of our Protestant brothers and sisters, we know that the Lord has a plan for our life and that we're supposed to wind up in heaven, right? If we live the way that the Lord calls us to, and that's the very important part. That is the narrow road, is not dipping our toe in and out and doing the spiritual hokey pokey back and forth between the interstate of the wide load, the wide road. It sometimes feels like you're carrying a wide load, but a wide road that leads to destruction, and the narrow road. We feel like sometimes, we're not living correctly or doing those things, but it's exactly that, where we're on that narrow road. Right, it is the turns and the struggles and the turning around and all those things. We don't know where the road leads. As we grow up through our life, we don't know who we're going to marry. We don't know if we're going to get married. We don't know where we're going to struggle. We don't know the addictions we're going to run into. We don't know the hills that we're going to have to climb, the mountains that we're going to have to push the accelerator to get over. Right, we don't know the valleys we're going to be in or the peaks we'll find ourselves on. But we know in our hearts, if we stay true to it, where it ends. Right? We don't know which way it's going to turn. Is it going to go left? Is it going to go right? Is it going to be dangerous? Is it going to be smooth? There's going to be so many different of those different points in our life. But the fact is, that's just part of the journey. That's where the trust comes in. To trust our Lord is in those places. And that's what it reminded me of when I was young and I was scared. And I just had to say, sometimes I would stop. And this is when I still had the Lord in my life before I got into college and started experimenting drugs and going off the beaten path. And back to the interstate, if you will, of the wide road. But I remember stopping and pulling over so many times and saying, Lord, I don't know where I am, and I don't have a phone, and I don't know where to find one, and I'm so lost, and I just need you, and I people are going to be so worried because I'm supposed to be there soon, and I would take the time to pray and remember who was in charge and remember who the real navigator of my life was. And I would just take time to sit, not to panic and not to worry and not to stress, but to look at that map and retrace my steps and look at where I went wrong, look at where I got off the beaten path and backtrack, right, with his guidance and get back on the road. But always I knew where it ended. I knew there was a place that I could get back to. I knew there was a place that I was going. And in that I could take solace. I could take peace out of that. And I know sometimes in this world that we're all on in our personal journeys that we can lose sight of that. And that's where we get in the struggles and we get off kilter and we start panicking and everything seems like the sky is falling and the ground is falling out beneath us. But folks, it just takes us remembering the end that's inside. And when you remember the end, you remember that if there's a heaven, there's someone who created it. If there's someone who created it and they've talked to you about it, then they want you there and they're going to give you everything you need to get there if you just look up. Instead of looking down at the poverty of our life and wherever we are in the moment of a struggle. But another thing he says in the song is he says, I'm lost, but I know where I'm going. And again, he has these lines where it's like detrimental, but in the end, I know there's hope, right? I don't know where the road leads, but I know exactly where it ends. I'm lost, but I don't know where I'm going. And he says, I don't know where I am, but I know exactly where I am. And those are the things that brought me such peace as I read the gospel and I thought, Lord, you're such a good God. Like here I am in the midst of the struggle. And so often I'm vulnerable with my men's group and I'm vulnerable with my wife, but sometimes I don't share just how deeply that I struggle as an evangelist with you guys on here because there's this false notion that I've got to be perfect and I got to show everybody I know that I got it figured out. But honestly, folks, the times where I feel like the shows that don't make sense and the things that I'm doing that I feel like I'm manufacturing come from the times where I forget that it's exactly in that humanity and in that vulnerability and in that authenticity, the best work the Lord does through me comes out through that. And so today, like, I don't know if there's a bunch of you that are feeling lost. You're feeling like you're going through the motions and you're doing the things that you're supposed to be to be a Catholic, but you feel lost in it and you still struggle and you're dealing with loss or the potential for loss or job struggles or relationship struggles or all those things. And you feel like you're trying to stay on this narrow road, but you're lost and you're turned around and you want to just sit down and cry sometimes, man. Even as a guy, you want to sit down and just let it out. It doesn't mean you're not still on the right path. I don't know where I am, but I know exactly where I am. And that's why that relationship with Christ matters so much. Going back to that well that is our Lord, right? He says, I will give you water that you will never thirst, right? I will give you that eternal water. Come to my well that never is empty, right? That never runs dry. Makes me think of the woman at the well when he said all those things to her, obviously paraphrasing. But the one other thing he says, this line, as I was listening to it again before I started the show, or whatever this is you want to call it today, this reflection for you all, since I'm by myself. He says, I'm going down this road and it's dark and I don't know where I'm going and it's dangerous and it's cold and I can feel how cold the night is outside of the car. He's just talking about all this stuff. And then through it all, he says, I'm lost, but I know where I'm going. I don't know where the road leads, but I know exactly where it ends. But then he says, I see this small light, a dim one, growing bigger and brighter and closer and stronger. And the closer I get, the more I see. And it made me remember again that, like, that's who Christ is on this narrow road. We all want to see the next 20 miles down the road. We want to see the next 100 miles down the road. We want to be able to just be on that straight shot on a flat piece of ground like you're driving through Kansas, and you want to just be able to see the end of where you're going miles and miles and miles away. But that's not the way this works. And a lot of times where we find ourselves in struggles when we're fighting against that. Like, we know that's not the way it works, but that's what we want so badly. And we find ourselves longing for the Lord just to show us the end game, show us the picture, give us what we need in the moment, make everything better right then. But as he alludes to here in the song, he says, I see this small light, a dim one, growing bigger and brighter and closer and stronger. And the closer I get, the more I see. And it's a reminder that as we're on this narrow road that is precarious, and it does have turns and hills and mountains and darkness and all these things, because Jesus said following him would never be easy, right? They will persecute you because they persecuted me. They will hate you because they've hated me. It is difficult to be a Christian, but through all that, there is that light. And sometimes it does seem dim, but as you move closer to it and as you continue forward on that hard road, as you seek the Lord harder in your life, seek and you shall find, he says. Knock and the door shall be opened to you. As you continue to chase after him down that road, that light gets a little brighter and a little brighter and a little brighter and a little brighter. And the next thing he says is, the closer I get, the more I see. He says, I don't know where I am, but I know exactly where I am. Folks, I don't know if any of this makes a lick of sense or if I've just been talking for 24 minutes. But it was through this time where I took time to go and visit my father and got out there just doing something. I stepped away from my situations. I stepped away from the things that seemed to be bearing down on me. I stepped away from the ministry for a couple of days, just like our Lord did, right? He would go off at night. He would leave the disciples and he would go away for a couple of days to pray. And I've started to understand more in my life that I can't go 90-0 all the time and expect to be fruitful. That I have to have time for retreat, whether it's a spiritual one at a monastery or at a retreat center or with some trusted friends or a spiritual director, or whether it's just running to a place that you feel comfortable and you can get away from things. That I need that in my life. And as I was down at my dad's this weekend, my dad and I spent time together, and you guys know our relationship, and it gets better and better the older that we get and the more time we spend together. I get down there with my kids, and I don't feel the weight of some of the things that, the pressures of trying to run a ministry and support it and raise money and all those things. And are we doing the right thing? Are we not doing the right thing? Lord, what do you want us to do? Where are we going? Trying to follow that narrow road. He just, in the silence on that lawnmower, he told me to turn on my iPhone, my music player, and it just randomly shuffled to this song, This Road I Know. And it led me to those lyrics from that beautiful poem this man sat down to write. And it said such profound things like, I don't know where the road leads, but I know exactly where it ends. And it reminded me that, John, no matter what struggle you're in, you know where you're going to wind up if you live the life you're called to, no matter how hard. And that it's not always going to feel like sunshine and rainbows, and the birds aren't always going to be chirping, and the road isn't going to be laid out straight and wide, and just a sunny day where you could see all the way down it. There's going to be rain, there's going to be storms, there's going to be clouds, there's going to be slick roads, there's going to be turns, there's going to be mountains and hills and all those things. But if you keep in mind the destination, then it reminds you that there's someone that's guiding you. There is a navigator, whether you feel like you have it in your life, somebody you can go to again and again. that could point on the map where to get back to, that can help you turn around if you've made a mistake, can help you get back on the right path if you've gotten off the road. Right? You can be lost but still know where you're going. Right? Make bad choices, make mistakes. We're all human. We're all imperfect. That's what confession is for. And that's the thing. Jesus has laid out what we need as a navigator. He's given us a roadmap, the sacraments, the Mass, confession, adoration, community with one another. Those are the tools that we need. That's our spiritual GPS to stay on the right path. And in those moments, the tough moments where the Lord allows us to get in a rut or where he allows us to take a wrong turn, it's those moments where sometimes he knows better than we do, whether we're getting too far off the path or whether we're walking away from him without knowing it, right? Letting other things occupy our time and taking us away from him, whether it's our relationships that aren't good for us or television or these stupid phones and social media and all those things. The Lord knows, and he allows in our life those times to allow us to get lost. But he also will be there in that still quiet, still voice, reminding us of where we're supposed to be going. But we have to take the time in our life, those opportunities for grace for those of you, again, who are on the narrow road, those time for prayer, those times for our family, for our wife and for our children, the time for adoration, the time for our night prayers and for giving ourselves our day to him every day and for meeting him in those struggles and just giving it to him during the day in those small prayers. That's what the Lord calls us to. And as I sat there in my struggles and as I returned home today, the Lord just started to open me up again like a wilted flower that had been watered, and I started to bud and to blossom again. I felt just the graces pour in as I'd come home and found my way again to the end of the journey from that trip, and knowing the road I was on was the road I was supposed to be on all the time. Right? Yes, there is a wide road that leads to destruction, and so many in the world are finding themselves there. But it's also, you could find yourself in the midst of struggles on that narrow road. So don't give up hope. Don't get upset with yourself. Don't push away the Lord when you find yourselves doing the things that you're called to do as a Catholic and doing things that you're trying to do to stay on the narrow road and finding yourself arid, finding yourself in times of desolation, finding no fruit. Because it's in those moments the Lord is challenging us and he's allowing us to push ourselves further because there's something else he wants to do in us. Whether it's a wound that needs to be healed or it's a repetitive sin that we need to lay down, or a habit, a vice, or an addiction that we need to step away from. The Lord allows us to feel those things, to get lost, but he gives us the roadmap. He gives us the directions through the sacraments, through community, through the Mass, through our relationships, through the ability to be vulnerable, through the virtues that we could practice in our life to get back on the right path. My friends, I'll leave you the words of this amazing songwriter and guy that I love to listen to, Zach Bryan, again. We'll put a link to that song in there, that poem, if you will, that he put to music. But he says, I don't know where the road leads, but I know exactly where it ends. I'm lost, but I know where I'm going. I don't know where I am, but I know exactly where I am. Enter through the narrow gate, Jesus says, for the gate is wide and the road broad that leads to destruction, and those who enter it are many. How narrow the gate and constricted the road that leads to life, and those who find it are few. My friends, it's a struggle to be a Christian. It's a struggle to be a Catholic man or woman in this world today. But if you do the things the Lord asks us, the things we talk about over and over again on this podcast, and you keep in mind that you may not know where the road leads, but you know where it ends, even in the moments where you feel lost, you know where you're going, then you're going to be all right. I hope this has been a help to you. I don't know why, if this made sense or not, but I felt like I needed to share with you. I've got a lot of things going on in my life, as I'm sure that you do in yours. I could use your prayers. Please know that you'll be in mine. Please pray for Father Jim Martell, my trusted friend and my spiritual father and basically a dad to me in my life. Please pray for the complete healing from the cancer in his body. Men, if you're not in a community, get in a community. Surround yourself with other men like I'm going to. As soon as I turn this off, I'm going to send this to Derek, and then I'm going straight to our men's group, and I'm going to pour myself into them and allow myself to be poured into. But folks, this is what this is about. It's about that narrow road. And maybe we're struggling on it, but we know where we're going. So this is the road I know. Sometimes we forget that, but let's all remember it's the road you know, the narrow one. God bless you. Listen in prayer in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, you never promised that walking the narrow road would be easy. We know that there's bumps and bruises and turns and curves and ravines and valleys and mountains, but Lord, you're there through it with us all. You're there as a navigator. You give us the map of the sacraments and community and the Mass and your very self in the Eucharist. Help us when we feel lost to turn back to you, to give you the wheel of the car of our life. And remind us always that though it's not easy, that it's the most worthy thing we could do with our life, to follow you forever, to love you, and to become the men and women that you call us to be. We put this all at your feet in your most holy name, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.